Hello everyone and welcome. I hope you're having a fantastic time. The sun is out. It's a beautiful Delhi weekend and it's terrific to have all of you with us. This is a very special session for me, and special because we're going to spend some time talking about the one family that most of us grew up in. Shiv is kind of fudgy by his actions, his thinking. He wasn't born into the army like the rest of us, but we accept him as being an army brat. So I am absolutely delighted and privileged to welcome my colleagues, friends, and superstar journalists. Can I have a very warm round of applause as we welcome first Gaurav Sawant. You've seen his exploits most recently in Ukraine. Before that, back in the day, he was a superstar. He was born a superstar in Kargil when he went out for the longest time. He even wrote a fantastic book. He'll talk to us about that. Shiv Aroor runs India Today Television. He's had extensive experience covering the military matters, defense, and also writing 3 books along with Rahul Singh, who isn't a colleague at this moment, but feels like one. He's part of the India Today family in many ways, and we're delighted to have him here as well. So welcome, all of you. I went to an army school, and there were kids I grew up with who went on to do exemplary acts of bravery and courage and win honors. I won't name them because I say this in the context of them back in school. When I looked at them, I said, there's nothing about them which looks remarkable, or nothing about them which gives you a sense that here is someone who would grow up to be a hero in Kargil, who would grow up to do something very courageous in a special operation. So what makes someone brave? What is it inside somebody's DNA, his upbringing, his culture, his ethos, which makes him rise to the occasion? When the day comes, when your nation needs, when your commanding officer commands, what is it that makes him step up? Now you've got people who've written books spanning wars, spanning special operations, and they have a sense as we join these dots together to try and understand what makes someone India's most fearless. So I'll start with Gaurav. On the back of all the experience that you have, as a reporter, as an anchor, as an editor, you've covered so many stories of courage. What is it, according to you, that is common between the heroes that you've profiled? What makes somebody brave? What makes somebody fearless?
It's the attitude. It's the attitude they're either born with, or it's the attitude that comes to them when they are in that situation. Because in that situation, you can either become a hero or you can be a coward. And it can happen to you in that instance. So for example, in Kargil, when you had the Pakistanis on all the heights and you had the Indian soldiers who were climbing up, and every patrol was either coming back unsuccessful or falling in the line of fire, you had these men, officers and jawans, who would say, we can do it. Minus 10 degrees temperature, Rahul. They would take off their shoes because that's the only way they could grip that rope to climb. Take off their bulky balaclavas and jackets. And in sub-zero temperature, just in their shirt sleeves and trousers, they would climb the rope to be able to get a toehold on that mountain, to be able to climb and reach on top. So it was, मैं हारूंगा नहीं और मैं अपनी पलटन की इज्जत गवाऊंगा नहीं. That was their attitude that made them do it, and they did it. And we were very honored and privileged to have watched that firsthand.
Shiv, you've now written 3 books profiling India's brave hearts. Do you see a pattern as you join these dots in the character profile of our war heroes, peacetime heroes who do something which you don't imagine any normal person to be capable of doing?
Rahul, it's actually amazing how common the attitude of all military heroes is. One would expect that in the writing of these books, when we met many of these military heroes, given the superhuman things that they've achieved, they would have a chip on their shoulder, they would have an air about them. But I'll just take 2 small examples to illustrate the point I'm trying to make, which is that these guys, Kirti Chakra, Paramveer Chakra, Mahavir Chakra, whatever it is, I found this absolutely unbelievable common point among all these heroes that I spoke to. And I'll take those two examples. One is the Galwan incident, Rahul, which was a soldier called Havaldar Dharamveer who survived. And the other is Major, I can't take his name, but everyone knows what his name is, the major who led the Uri surgical strikes. These two, a soldier and an officer, and they both said precisely the same thing when I asked them the question that you've asked, Rahul. What is it that made you so brave in those circumstances? And their identical answer was, anyone would have done the same thing in our situation. We just happened to be in that situation. You know, fate dictated that we were in that situation at that point of time and we had to decide. But anyone else in the forge would have acted in the same brave manner. So they were completely discounting their uniqueness. They were basically saying, we in the forge are built to be brave, and only some of us get to be in the situations where we've got to do something big, and there is no decision for us because failure is not an option.
You know, I've heard some bravehearts say it, but that's actually not true, and I'll tell you why. See what's happening in the Russia-Ukraine war at this moment. If anyone is supposed to be brave, then the Russian army is being anything but brave. They're retreating against a weaker foe. So it's not as if you put somebody in a particular circumstance, Rahul, and he'll rise to the occasion. There is something in the milieu of the armed forces, that particular Paltan, the grouping, their josh, their attitude, individual bravery, individual mental outlook that makes somebody stand and not flee. You're seeing what the Russian army is doing, and any of the stories all of you have profiled are about people who rose to the occasion when it mattered most.
While I agree with what Gaurav and Shiv say, I feel two aspects stand out. One is sense of purpose, and the other is I'll make my training count. This is what really distinguishes these heroes. I'll give you a small example. One of the heroes we've written about is a guy called Major K.B. Singh, Konjangbam Brajendra Singh from Manipur, who grew up in a small village on the Assam-Manipur border, a village called Dibong. And, he was just 7 or 8 years old when insurgents would come to their house at an ungodly hour and ask his parents to, whip up a quick meal for them. And this particular night was Yashong. Yashong is the Manipuri equivalent of Holi. And the kids had gone to bed early. And these three insurgents came in with their automatic weapons and said, please give us a meal. That was one Holi this 8-year-old boy never forgot. 20 years on, he was posted in the same area as a young major this time. Major KB. And he had been planning an operation for a long time. I'm talking about sense of purpose. So his commanding officer says, when do you want to launch that operation? He says, on Holi. So Holi had been this recurring theme. He says, why Holi? He says, Holi because this is the time they would be least expecting us. And is bari hum Holi khoon se khelenge. This was what he said. It was not that he did it, it was some fanciful thing he wanted to do. He had planned for this operation for 6-7 months. The operation lasted 3 to 4 days. And they wiped out some of the top militant leaders in that part of Manipur. And he used to get calls from the insurgents saying, हमें पता है तुम्हारी माँ का नाम क्या है, तुम्हारी भाई का गाड़ी का number ये है. So I asked him, were you not scared? He says, sir, I'm doing the right thing. Why do I have to be scared? So that was that sense of purpose this man grew up with. And when he was leading this team of 14, 15 of some of the best fighting men of Assam Rifles, he knew that they had been training for this day and they would all make their training count. So those two things, a sense of purpose and the confidence in their training.
As we speak so much about the war heroes, let's spend a moment focusing on the families that give them the courage, the support and the backing to do what they do. And what struck me as remarkable as I went through Rahul and Shiv's book is the instances where the wife of a fallen officer or a Jawan has signed up to join the services, saying, I will take forward my husband's mission. And that gives me goosebumps. Shiv, you've just lost your loved one. Typically, you would imagine that somebody retreats into a shell, hates the army that took your loved one away from you. Instead, you've got young children, wives saying, I want to don that uniform.
It's actually incredible. I think there are five occasions across our 3 books, Rahul, in which officers or soldiers have lost their lives, and their wives have given up a pretty stable life. One was a professor in a college. One worked with an investment bank. One was a physical education teacher in a school. Just to sign up for the army. One of the, many people here may not know this, but one of the Veer Chakra awardees of the Galwan clash, his wife, Rahul, who lives in a small village in Madhya Pradesh, has just entered the army. She's at the academy. She's going to be in the army very soon. Another one is already a logistics officer. She lost her husband post the Pulwama clash. And we've spoken to all of these army ladies. We've spoken to them and asked them, what was it? Why did you feel the need to do this? And for them, once the media spotlight over the death of an officer or a soldier kind of evaporates, their only army, and you know this, Rahul, the only army is the forge. The unit stays in touch with the families. The unit is there to help the families with anything they want. And I think that kind of fuels a sense of purpose. And they feel that the only way to keep their husband's legacy alive, or to complete an incomplete mission in the case of young officers or soldiers, is to join the forge themselves. It may seem very irrational because some of them have young children, it completely uproots them, it disjoints their life, but they've got an absolutely razor-sharp sense of purpose when they say, I don't care how I'm going to do it, I'm going to train, I'm going to get into the forge. And they all have.
And you describe, Rahul, several of these instances where a Jawan or an officer about to go on a special operations mission, for example, is calling his loved one, his wife, just as an example. He can't tell her what he's doing. She can sense something is amiss. And there are instances of them Googling the weather to get a sense of how things are wherever they are posted. And yet they're never saying no. They're never stopping them or emotionally blackmailing them to be careful. They're just saying, you go out and do the right thing.
So, very rightly said. So there's all of these guys, even as we speak, the army is launching hundreds of operations in the mountains of Kashmir, in the jungles of Northeast. Most of these soldiers who go out on these missions have a quick WhatsApp call, or if the signal permits, or a quick call with their families. And imagine the anxiety of the family when you see the last seen message was 3 days ago or 4 days ago, and you can't get through to the number. It can be like really overwhelming. And so there's this one lady, she called up her husband's cosmet. She says, I can't get through to him. What do I do? He hasn't called me. He says, don't worry if he hasn't called you. Just pray that nobody else calls you. You know how it is. So, and these families are so inspiring, Rahul. All of us have met these families. All of us come from army families. Shiv is also now half army. And when you talk to these people, the fortitude they show. I was having a chat with Group Captain Gaurav Singh's father. He's a Rajraf officer, Colonel KP Singh. And when I speak with him, it's as if nothing has happened. He talks so fondly about Varun, talks so fondly about what Varun achieved in his. Varun was in his 30s when he was one of the officers who died in the serious chopper crash. But we wrote about him not for that, but for a really crazy mission he undertook in a few years ago, for which he got a Shaurya Chakra. He was asked to eject thrice, 3 or 4 times, Shiv, if I remember rightly. But he did not, because he was flying in LCA and he did not want the LCA's reputation, the first India-built fighter, to get tarnished. So when the families talk about these things, for instance, can I take a minute? So Varun was one of the guys who was shortlisted for the Gaganyaan mission. And he didn't make it because, there's something, you have to have a certain amount of jaw density. That was the reason he couldn't make it. So his father says Varun's favorite line was, your destiny is, your jawbone decides your destiny. That kind of, they come up with these anecdotes and you don't really feel as if they've, what they've undergone.
And speaking of anecdotes and lines which keep you going, ye dil mange more. Just imagine, you've come back from a mission which was successful. Most such officers or jawans are pulled back and you send a second team out because they've just gone, risked their lives, come back. You give them some break, you allow them to recuperate. And Captain Vikram Batra wasn't like that. Not just was he sent, I think it was by Colonel Joshi at that time, he also wanted to go. You've just baal bach ke wapis aaye, and here's this young man who's telling the country, dil mange more.
So 5140 was the peak that he had won. And these were some of the initial victories in Kargil. Very difficult ones, Rahul, because the Pakistanis were very well entrenched. So 5140 happened, Tololing happened, the entire country knew about ye dil mange more. And in that operation, because they were exposed to the weather, they'd given up their woolens just to be able to climb. He had fever. Vikram Batra had fever. So he was supposed to go down for R&R, rest and recuperation. But he heard on the wireless the two teams that had gone for .4875, which was later known as Gun Hill and now Batra Top. The teams that went up, they couldn't reach the top. Somewhere down the line, the Pakistanis had their machine guns so effectively deployed that every advance was being pushed back and casualties were happening. So this is the time he volunteered. He said, I know the lay of the land. I am acclimatized. The new team will take time. I know what will happen. And then Colonel, now General Y.K. Joshi, he kept saying, no, you need to rest, you need to rest. He said, I'm the only one who can do it. And actually, he was the only one who could do it. He went up despite the fever. He was a brave heart. I mean, it's in your DNA. You're built, you're meant to do it. He knew he would do it. And he was able to break through the cordon, get to the last bunker, lob the grenade, fire at the Pakistanis, destroy it. Unfortunately, that's the time, very heavy bombardment from the other side and a very accurate machine gun fire took him down. But not before he captured that place and ensured. No, what happens is the moment you capture, the enemy mounts a counter attack. So you not only capture that point, then you turn everything around to be able to beat back the counter attack. And this is where leadership really matters. And his leadership mattered at that point of time, Rahul.
So what's the most dangerous thing, Gaurav, that's ever happened to you as a war reporter?
So Shiv and I were together in Libya. We entered Libya illegally without telling you because you would have said no. We had our visa for Egypt. We tried to get into Libya legally and we couldn't. So one night Shiv and I said, we can't come to Egypt and then go back. With the Bedouins, we actually crossed a part of the Sahara Desert in the middle of the night with them, with some others, with $10,000, $5,000 each in our pocket, without a visa, without knowing where we were going. And if somebody had killed us and buried us in the desert, we wouldn't have known. But we managed to get inside. We managed to get to Ras Lanuf. We got strafed by Colonel Gaddafi's Air Force, the rebels, but we survived.
Gaurav ek din marwayega, I'll tell you why. You know, he had gone to Ukraine. Mercifully, his wife Aditi is not here right now. And he told her some other story, okay? About where he was and what he was doing. And of course, I knew where he was. And where Aditi called me and said, wahan pe hai Gaurav, something basically about getting away. And I was about to tell her that I'm telling him the same thing, just leave Kiev and get out. And ye maan hi nahi raha hai. He's telling her that Rahul's got me over there, wo jaan hi nahi de raha. I'm like, that's not true. And the problem is, you do this in school when, for example, you've gone off with a particular girl without telling your parents, and then, that happened like in the army public school some 20 years ago. Oh, exactly same wali feeling आई. I said, इसने अपनी बीवी को कुछ बताया है और वो मुझे फोन करके पूछ रही है. And if I reveal the truth, then he's had it, and more importantly, I've had it. So anyway, somehow it clicked at that instance. Gaurav's back in one piece, and that's what matters most. Shiv, tell us your wildest story.
Both Gaurav and I had emails 11 days after entering Libya from our families saying, why the hell didn't you tell us you're going to Libya? And this was an era before smartphones. So there was no WhatsApp, no 4G, 5G. There was no G itself. There was nothing. And so we didn't have any connectivity anywhere. But just two small incidents which I'll tell you about what happened to us in Libya. Both Gaurav and I got quote-unquote kidnapped separately on two separate occasions. And we both got out of them in exactly the same way. So Rahul, what happened was, look, Libya is like this obscure country. I don't think anybody would go to Libya in their lifetime unless it is for work, or you have some, or you're a smuggler, or you're an ISIS terrorist, or something like that. Otherwise, you're not going to go there. Okay? Rahul was a good enough boss to actually send Gaurav and me there during the war. So there was this, the Indian ambassador to Egypt had basically told Gaurav and me, you guys shouldn't go to Libya. Just stay here. It's nice here. I'll give you a room. Relax here. You tell your office you went there and they sent you back. But Gaurav and me, being the journalists we are, we crossed illegally, like he said. So promptly 5 days later, Gaurav got kidnapped. Okay, so I had no idea where Gaurav was for 48 hours. No phones, no WhatsApp. Just imagine a world without WhatsApp, guys, for 1 second. Okay, no contact. I have no idea where he is. I don't know where to go because everyone speaks Arabic. He had forgotten the magic word that the ambassador had taught him, saying, if you are in a tight spot with people, just remember these two words, Sahafi al-Hind, which means Indian journalist in Arabic. And he finally remembered it on day 2, and he said it to those guys, and they let him go. And the reason why that's a big deal is because in that part of the world, if you say you're from India, you become like a hero. They're like, my God, why would you leave India, that beautiful democratic paradise, to come to this narak, this horrible place, and that too as a journalist? So he did that. He got free. I got like abducted separately. I remembered it. I said it. They fed the both of us really well. They took us to their houses. It's a different story that those people who kidnapped us now are probably ISIS terrorists themselves. But yeah, it was fabulous.
You see how he's smiling. You realize the problem when we were talking about what makes somebody courageous or do crazy things, depending on how you see it. Look at how he's smiling. This is when his family is concerned, his father, his mother, his wife, daughter, and he's like smiling. And that really is the Josh. Rahul, what's the toughest situation that you've been in?
Well, I've never been kidnapped or shot at.
You need to spend more time with these guys.
But
they'll find a way of getting you there.
I'll tell you an interesting incident which actually shows the kind of work we do and the kind of work our soldiers do. So this was 2008. I was reporting out of Congo for a few weeks. General Bipin Rawat was then the brigade commander over there, and I was traveling extensively. And I was with this army detachment at a place called Nyaragongo, which is right next to the Virunga National Park. So you have the active volcano on one side, and you have Lake Kivu on the other side. And our forces and were the buffer zone between General Laurent Kunda's private general's forces and the Congolese forces. So our job was to keep them away, buffer zones, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers. So and we were sleeping in tents over there. I was staying with this unit, I think it was 6, Chesik. And we had these, anti-aircraft guns booming, bullets flying all around. And there was a massive earthquake at night. And I was in the tent with a young major. So I think his name was Saurabh, if I remember rightly. I said, Saurabh, do something. What should we do? He said, sir, go back to sleep. If we run this way, there's an active volcano. It's going to explode. If we go that way, there's Lake Kivu, which is also known as an exploding lake. So, it can let out a lot of poisonous gases, which are trapped over there. So he says, either way, we have no choice. So this is the kind of, part of the experiences one has had as a defense writer, reporter.
The amazing thing about India's Most Fearless is that it's capturing stories of modern day heroism. So it's not just about what happened in the 62 war or what happened in the 71 war or what happened during Kargil. And Shiv, I think that's important because very often, for many people, somebody's death or act of bravery is something you acknowledge when it happens, when you see the last rites, or when you see a citation being accepted by their family or mother, father, wife during one of our national events. And otherwise, it's just a lost memory. It's just something people forget, and this keeps them going.
You actually said it exactly like it is, Rahul. We constantly get asked about why we actually even wrote this book, and one of the reasons is precisely that on Republic Day and Independence Day every year, there are a bunch of press releases that the government issues with single paragraph citations about someone's feat for a Shaurya Chakra or a Veer Chakra or whatever it is. And it always felt so odd that someone's incredible military achievement of bravery or valor or selflessness could all be compressed into a single paragraph and then completely forgotten. The lucky ones will have some media attention with people going to their houses, cameras, etc. But most of those people are reduced to obituaries by the unit on page 4 of newspapers every single year. So we decided that I think these are stories that need to be told, not because they are, inspirational or nationalistic, because these are actually incredible stories about people like us. Like Rahul was saying, these are people with normal families, people paying their normal EMIs. Fauji's are not superhumans. They face the same nonsense as all of us do on a daily basis, and in addition to living between life and death. So, those are the kind of people we were actually writing about. So, I think it was an incredible experience really capturing that aspect of it.
Fauji's are totally normal till the one day they are not. Yeah. When they decide, either on their own or because their commanding officer has asked them to do something which history will record and remember, and about which potentially films would be made or stories would be told and people would cry long after they're gone. Gaurav, a lot of this getting captured, and I see now you're a part of a very active Army Literature Festival circuit, which essentially means that these stories are being celebrated. It's not something which is just done and forgotten, but something which is actively remembered, celebrated, cherished. People hear those stories, very often get inspired by them.
Rahul, a nation needs its heroes. And a nation like ours, which is constantly at war, whether it's at the Pakistan border, whether it's the tension at the China border, and we saw the flare-up at Galwan that we reported, or the situation in Doklam or Arunachal Pradesh, or our Navy or the Air Force, or even counter-terror operations. Our nation from 1947 has been at war constantly. The fact that all of us can sit here and celebrate our Holi and Diwali and Eid and Christmas is because we have our soldiers there. The fact that we're able to recount their tales of unparalleled valor inspires the next generation of soldiers. That is something which is extremely interesting. What I also found remarkable, Rahul, when I was interacting with these soldiers, when you write, so for example, Kargil, the 155mm howitzers, they were seen as a game changer. Till then, everyone talked about Bofors and the controversy. But in Kargil, when 100 guns boomed together on Tololing or on Tiger Hill, that's when the entire nation started saying, yes, we need modern artillery. Something that your father, Brigadier Gurmeet Kanwal had been talking about and writing about so extensively, that we need modern artillery. And ask anyone, which, you remember that movie, Troy, when Hector is asked, the gods are on our side. He says, no, gods are on the side of the bigger battalion. Gods are always on the side of those who have modern artillery and modern armor and modern infantry and the fighting spirit. So we are able to tell those stories because we are just lucky enough to be on ground zero and to be able to report all these stories.
It's one of the most majestic sights if you've seen. Whole host of artillery guns booming. You've seen some of those images during the Kargil war. There is nothing that gives you greater goosebumps than to see the Indian artillery fire. And what a majestic sight that is. They used to be booming right around my school when I was growing up. So we used to have broken window panes virtually every second week with some gun causing a window pane to go out. It was a lot of fun. It would stop the class for a while, but hey, so what? It's very difficult to ask a parent to pick a favorite child. So I won't do that, but rather I get our guests to talk about the one story and narrate that story in a couple of minutes, which you find most remarkable. This is obviously not their favorite war hero because that would be very unfair. But just one story. You've got people sitting here at Sahitya, and you can tell us, Gaurav, in Hindi, in English, pick your language, tell us the story like your father would. You know his father, right? We all grew up listening to his commentary during Republic Day. He can do a mini light version of his father. Not as good as Brigadier Sawant, of course, but he can try that. So you give us your story. Okay, so here it is, 2.5 minutes. Tell us the story.
So one of the most remarkable aspects of conflict I found was faith. Faith in in your commanding officer, faith in the men you fight with, and faith in God. I'll get back to that time when Tiger Hill had to be won. And Tiger Hill was one of the most difficult battles. So you had all these guns lined up, but then there had been a series of reverses. Our boys went up, couldn't succeed, came back, bodies were coming back every other day. So to boost the morale, you had the religious teacher. And those who are from the armed forces would realize religious teacher plays a very important role in any battalion because he would boost your morale. And there was a havan with a new gun coming in. So bakaida ek kalawa bandha, तिलक किया और उसके बाद गीता का एक उपदेश था जो उस रिलीजियस टीचर ने उन जवानों को बताया and that became actually something that I really swear by now. Yogeshwar Shri Krishna tells Arjun, Hatova prapyasi swargam jitva va bhokshasi mahim tasmad uttishta konteya yuddhai krit nishchaya. And this means that when you fight battle, if you die in battle, you will go to heaven. If you win the battle, you will rule over this earth that is as beautiful as heaven. That is why, O son of Kunti, take a firm resolve and fight. And that is what an army must do. Fight to win, whatever the consequences. That story has stayed with me forever.
Rahul, tell us your favorite story.
So I'll just deviate from hardcore combat and I'll pick up from where Pandit Chaurasia left in the previous session. So he said कि अगर आप कुछ दिल से करते हो, sincerity से करते हो, तो भगवान भी आपकी मदद करते हैं. I'll talk about an operation, a mission which took place. It's one of the craziest rescue missions. Not rescue actually, it was a retrieval mission. Shiv and I have heard and written about. This is about two Navy divers called Ashok Kumar and Veer Singh. If you remember, in 2015, there was a Navy Dornier crash in which, a Navy woman officer died for the first time. Her name was Lieutenant Kiran Shekhawat. And luckily, the pilot was rescued, but the co-pilot, Lieutenant Abhinav Nagori, also died. And the Dornier was resting on the seabed. So I won't go into how it was located and all that, but so there was this team of clearance divers which was summoned from Bombay. And these two guys decided to go down. Now they realized that the sea was very rough, extremely rough. And the day they went for the mission, it was calm. And it was at 60 meters. And these divers are qualified to operate only at 50-55 meters. Also, their equipment can operate only at 50-55 meters. But these guys knew that, the families were waiting to hear about their loved ones. There had to be a sense of closure. They were given a choice whether they want to go in for it or not. But these guys decided to go in for it. There were two dangers. One was when going down at those depths, they could suffer from a condition called nitrogen narcosis. And while coming up, because of rapid decrease in pressure, something called decompression sickness, which can be terrible. But these guys still went there. They used their brute strength to kind of pull apart those doors, that mesh of wires, and over 2 successive days retrieved the bodies of the lady officer and the co-pilot. And Shiv and I were talking to Commander Ashok Kumar. So he says, coming back to the, that sense of purpose and sincerity, he says, जब आप कोई काम दिल से करते हो, जब आप कोई काम selflessly करते हो, तो भगवान भी आपके साथ होता है. कहता है, the day we launched the mission, उससे पहले the sea state was crazy. The day we finished the mission, again it was bad. But during those two days while we were there, he says the sea was as calm as a swimming pool.
Shiv.
Since we've already spoken about the Army and the Navy, I'll tell you a quick story about the Air Force, which is a story in our book, Rahul. This is a guy which I'm sure people who haven't read the book, you've never heard of this guy. His name is Squadron Leader Ishan Mishra. Flying a Sukhoi 30 fighter at something like 50 or 60 feet. Okay, really, really low altitude. Fighter completely out of control. Nothing. The cockpit is not answering anything. Everything is out of control. He's about to crash. There's a village in his path, and two pilots there, and this guy is sitting in front. Literally about a few seconds, Rahul, before the fighter hits the ground, he ejects. tries his best to save the fighter, can't do it, ejects, blacks out. Imagine ejecting at like something like 25, 30 feet. Lands, crashes into a village in some kind of swamp.
And Shiv, he delays that because he's flying over a village
Yeah,
to save.
he was trying to delay the ejection so that he doesn't hit the village. So he manages to avoid the village. Aircraft bangs into the outskirts of the village, and this guy is like lands in some horrible swamp somewhere, completely out, unconscious. And when he gains consciousness, like blinding lights, little bit people, villagers pointing torches at him, he can hear someone say, "Where is his leg?" Okay, he says, "Where is his leg?" And I won't spoil the story, but basically what happened was his leg got ripped off during the ejection because it was at such low altitude. Something went wrong, so his leg got torn off during the ejection, and the leg landed somewhere else. And then he goes to the hospital. He's pumped full of painkillers and morphine, whatever it is. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Rahul, he said, "I was so completely pumped full of medicines." And imagine a fighter pilot losing your leg. Your career is gone. Okay. And apparently his friends and his family said the only thing he kept saying after gaining consciousness is, "Yeah, koi mujhe cold coffee pila do, yaar, cold coffee." He had a craving for cold coffee. So people brought crates of Amul Cool and kept it there, and apparently he finished all of it. He says, "I don't remember anything but having this craving for cold coffee." And he didn't spend even a single moment grieving for his career. Imagine losing a leg. Anyone, but imagine a fighter pilot. That's your thing. You can't fly without one leg. Well, he immediately enrolled himself to a rehabilitation place, got himself a prosthetic leg, which is like half bionic. He's able to jog. And the great news, Rahul, is he's just put in an application with the Air Force saying, "I can fly transport aircraft. Please let me back into the cockpit."
And, Rahul, and he's currently undergoing the staff course at Wellington.
Wow, that's quite a character. Fighter pilots are crazy people. Crazy because if you're not a fighter pilot, you're very jealous of them. If you are a fighter pilot, it's the coolest place to be. And spend a moment, Shiv, talking about Abhinandan Vartaman, because that's the one guy all of you know. He says he couldn't hear the instruction which was being given to him. I had a few fighter pilots who were not fighter pilots when we grew up, but became fighter pilots later. I am pretty certain he could hear what was being said and he decided to do it.
Rahul, he was trying to behave like Gaurav and Shiv when they went to Libya.
Yeah, when they went to Libya, they said, "Hame awaaz nahi aa rahi, hum to ja rahe." It's a bit like that. And just imagine, you got a MiG-21 up against an F-16. An F-16, even the ones the Pakis have, is much better than a MiG-21, unfortunately. And it's really a no clash. It's like a Maruti 800 versus a Mercedes. You know how it's going to end. And it ended with the Mercedes losing, Shiv.
I don't think Pakistan is ever going to forget losing a modern fighter to a MiG-21. All the years of bad things that have been said about MiG-21s ended on that one day. I mean, there are many problems, but that one thing that Abhinandan Vartaman did basically said, "Boss, you can't say anything bad about MiG-21s now." Like Rahul said, an Alto went against a Mercedes and won that day. What happened to Abhinandan Vartaman in the air that day, Rahul, is something that a lot of people actually say. There's when that end game kicks in, when that killer instinct kicks in, when you're up against the enemy and you know that, you have it, I've got it, I have this, this guy's in my sights, I can do this. But your radar controller is saying, "Boss, वापस आ जाओ," or "You can't do this." All the rules go straight out the window. Here's a guy, even now, and I think Rahul also knows this, Abhinandan Vartaman could have very easily been court-martialed, at that point of time. And I don't think any of those things crossed his mind. He just said, "Look, I've got a lock, I've got a missile ready, doesn't matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this guy down. Baad mein jo kuch hota hai, we'll see." That's what happened.
And the amazing thing is, he's still so normal. Like you meet him, you're thinking of, "Oh my God, this is the guy who went into Pakistan and brought down the F-16. You've got just goosebumps just seeing him. And Gaurav, he's totally nonchalant about it. Yeah, that happened. Now what's happening and life goes on. That's in the past. Of course, he's a hero. He's a hero for the Air Force. He's a hero for India. but he's just a totally normal guy, somebody you can sit with, whether it's cold coffee or we're in the middle of the afternoon at Sahitya, so I can't say anything else, but you can get a drink with the guy.
Absolutely, and he's stuff that legends are made of, because he will inspire another generation of air warriors. They would want to be like him. They will defy whatever orders they're given when you have a kill. And you will get that kill, because in history, he'll go down as the only man ever on a MiG-21 to have taken down an F-16. So bad was the situation that the Americans are also trying to hide that information, because it's the reputation of the F-16 that's actually gone to the dogs, courtesy Pakistan. But, that's point one. Point two is how he handles himself in a very difficult situation. So there you are, when you land, you don't know whether you're in India or you're in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So he says, Bharat Mata ki Jai. When he sees the hostile reaction, he knows at least he's in POK. Then he's being assaulted. He doesn't give up, Rahul. Even there, he holds himself with poise. He just gives out his military number, his name and rank, because that's the only thing he's supposed to give out. When he's asked, how's the tea? Pakistanis are very excited about that. Tea was fantastic. Look at his attitude. I mean, he's like an absolute rock star, and the Pakistanis knew it. Also, perhaps the fact that our Air Force knows that in case something like that happens, there is the Air Force that's ready, and there was an establishment that is ready. Subsequently, that we heard that the Pakistanis were scared कि army chief के पैर कांप रहे थे कि आज की रात कत्ल की रात हो जाएगी. So that is something, is that change in attitude of a nation which tells the adversary, you don't mess around with this country.
It gives confidence to everyone, Rahul, that you're in Pakistan, you know your country, your armed forces have your back, and they'll come and get you.
See, it's also about ethos and values, and I'll tell you a small story related to Abhinandan only. So this was the 27th of Feb, and I was driving to my office when I suddenly saw these images of this young pilot being, all of us have seen those images. So I immediately called up an Air Force friend and I asked him if to identify this guy. So he says he's Abhinandan Vartaman. I asked him, is he Air Marshal Vartaman's son? He said, yes, he's Air Marshal Vartaman's son. Air Marshal Vartaman is a friend of mine, and I'd known him when he was in service, now settled in Chennai. I immediately called up Air Marshal Vartaman. I said, sir, terrible. How are you holding up? He says, don't worry. He's a brave guy and he's a good son. He'll weather this storm. So that's the kind of, while Abhinandan was brave and all of us saw his bravery on television and everywhere, and it was recognized with the Veer Chakra. But these aspects about his father, I mean, you would never know Air Marshal Vartaman, but that is the kind of values these guys have grown up with, and that is how their parents feel about their kid being being held as prisoner of war or
in fact, captivity. His father was totally cool. This is when he's with the Pakistanis as a virtual prisoner of war, as a captive. His father is telling others, calm down, relax, he'll be fine. Now his son is in the captivity of the Pakistani army. Everyone's calling and going crazy and is very worried, very naturally. And the father, whose son is across the border, is saying, he'll be fine, don't worry. You don't have to stress, he'll be fine, he'll come back. And that is just, kudos to the attitude of the Indian Army and the families that make up the Indian Army. So what happens next? Is there a India's Most Fearless 4 coming? I have a recommendation. There was this amazing operation. This is when the People's Liberation Army was amassed on the opposite side of Pangong Tso Lake in Ladakh. And India was running out of options, and there's a lot of pressure on the armed forces and on the government to do something. In the middle of the night, and some people that I knew and grew up with climbed up a mountaintop and went and sat on the heads of the Moldo garrison of the People's Liberation Army. So I don't know if you're planning to tell that story, but that is a story that's worth telling, because on that day, if things had gone wrong, two of the largest armies in the world could potentially have been at war. And that is just a fascinating story, Shiv, that's waiting to be told.
The good news is the only reason we didn't tell that story in this book, Rahul, is because while we were writing the book, that operation was actually taking place. So it was a story in motion and we couldn't have done it. But I promise you it's going to be in the next book. There are many more India's Most Fearless books that are going to come because I don't think valor is ever going to be in short supply from the Indian Armed Forces. We are very keen not only to cover counter-terror operations. Our book also covers, humanitarian relief operations, selflessness in service, people saving other people's lives. So yeah, there's a long way to go for these books.
Gaurav, what an amazing story. You've got the PLA deployed all across in a state of operational alert. You go and sit on their heads in a way that chokes them and gives you the kind of leverage that people thought was simply impossible given the kind of adversary you were up against. And this in a country that, fought and lost the 62 war.
The 62 war was fought and lost by some in the mind before it was lost on ground. And the difference between 62 and the current situation is that this is a war that's, and thank you for sending me to Galwan and to DBO, because that's again a situation where we were able to see firsthand the manner in which our soldiers were deployed at Daulat Beg Oldie, which is where the Chinese were trying to come in a big way, but our army preempted them in certain locations. Our army preempted them by going on top of the Moldo garrison and overlooking the garrison. So not in their wildest dreams, perhaps the Chinese thought that the Indian army would come and dominate them.
Now you also see why Shiv and Gaurav have the best job in our newsroom. I'm stuck managing news lists. They're the ones in Daulat Beg Oldie, Libya, having all the fun. Can I request you all, as we bring this session to an end, to stand with me for 1 minute as we remember the selfless fortitude, the courage, the josh, the nationalism, the patriotism and the fervor of our brave Jawans, army officers, Air Force, Navy, who helped tell the kind of stories that Rahul, Shiv and Gaurav have spoken of and written about. And we just remember them and their loved ones, their families, their children, their mother, their father. Just for a moment, close your eyes and say a prayer.
So in the army, there is a tradition. When you remember the soldiers who've made the supreme sacrifice of their lives, there is the last post. But after the last post, there is always the rouse, because you rise again to defend your country. And may I request you all to join me in saying, Bharat Mata Ki
Jai!
Bharat Mata Ki
Jai!
Bharat Mata Ki
Jai! Thank you so much. It was fantastic having you with us at Sahitya English.